Hey, Alex. Hey, Ray.
Hey,
Joel Earls here with We're the Mighty. It's great to sit and talk with you gents today.
thanks.
Congrats on your film. I thoroughly enjoyed it there in the theater. Got a chance to talk with Ray afterwards. So, you know, in reviewing the press notes and reviewing not just the film, but also some of your backgrounds, um, you brought this story to light, a true story, very quickly. What has it been like seeing it on screen from A to Z now, and now that it's out in public, especially for Ray, having lived this?
For me, watching it, each time I watch it, and particularly like with veterans and guys like you, it's when I get the feedback, it's just like less weight off my shoulders. There've been like phases of like approval. There's like to the guys that were there, right? Hey, right, tell me what you got. Like what did I fuck up? What did I mess up? So getting their sign off, I'm like, whew, all right. And then there's like appealing to the masses of the veteran community or active duty military community. And I want to make sure it's representative. You can't please everyone, but each time I go to these screenings and you start talking to, wives or, sons or daughters who lost a loved one that was either active duty or a veteran, yeah, that weight just starts to get lighter and lighter. And as it starts to function more as a voice or maybe as a conversation starter, it starts to become more like initially it was for Elliot because he doesn't remember, but it starts to function more as a something more useful, something I think, yeah, more tangible and in other facets, I guess, for me.
You're able to process it. Thank
Yeah.
you, Ray.
Yep.
Go ahead, Alex. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, no, not at all. What I think what I would say is that uh, the experience of watching it, I don't really get, partly because when I finish working on something, uh, which is the final mix of the film, I then tend never to watch a film again. I can't change anything, so what's the point in a way? The meaningful part of it was being on set. That was the really powerful sort of experiential bit of the whole process, particularly on this film because there was the responsibility of giving an account of real people, real lives, a moment of real trauma, real horror, actually. And not only that, the set we built was kind of like a location. We really attempted to accurately recreate the physical space, a house that, when you walked through a door, you didn't suddenly start walking to scaffold and bits of plywood. There was a whole house. You could go upstairs, you could look out the windows. It functioned like a location. And then while we were filming, Ray, of course, is there all day, every day, directing the actors and sort of bringing all of his personal knowledge. But we also had, an actor, Cosmo, playing Elliot, or an actor, Joe Quinn, playing Joe Hildebrand, and the real guy who experienced this thing and had their legs damaged in this way is standing a few feet away watching the recreation of it. So there's these incredibly complicated layers, sort of blurring of reality, memory, recreation, but at the heart of it is experience. What sort of what this looked like, what it sounded like, and then we shot it quickly in 5 weeks, but 5 weeks is also in other ways quite a long time, and that was incredibly powerful, incredibly educational, and incredibly meaningful.
Absolutely. Having those men on set, um, my gut sense is that you had them coach some of these actors and maybe, finding that inner inspiration or those moments of that they could recall. Is that correct?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. You know the deal. Yep.
What was that? Could you describe from both sides what it was like for the SEALs that have been there, maybe the Marines you had, and also for the actors, just their feedback to you?
Yeah, I mean, not every single actor had their representative there. Only a handful of guys came out, but they had discussions. They talked. We interviewed all of them. So, you know, I kind of had to really just keep track of what I needed to represent for them, whether
Mhm.
that's the physical action they did, you know, whether they, you know, I remember locking down this street, or I remember going up to the roof and like doing X, Y, and Z. But the other part of it was how they felt, whether it was fear coming out, you know, in spite of fear, still functioning, those internal struggles, like essentially a bunch of little micro arcs, micro character arcs
Mhm.
that I wanted to represent. And then I think the actors want to do that. You know, they want to represent that as well, not just the machine, you know, the running and gunning of it, which is fun, but yeah, they wanted to represent how they felt. And so that was me, you know, keeping track of that, which is a bit challenging. Um, and yeah, I think they all did really well. You know, they're great actors, so that I didn't have to do much other than just like reiterate kind of like where they were in their arc. And a lot of responsibility there, a lot of pressure because those are my friends, and like I'd rather represent them more accurately than represent myself, right? As in, like I was more focused on the other guys because those are my friends, and you know, it's putting them before me is more important. But,
Absolutely. That's what a good teammate's supposed to do.
yeah.
I would say that the the most important part of it is actually a word that Ray used, and this was true with the actors, but it was also true with the entire crew, was what that gave everybody, the presence of these people, was this immense sense of responsibility to get it right. What
Mhm.
you had was a cast and crew that were primarily civilians. There were a couple that were veterans, but mainly civilians, and civilians that were doing their best to get this right and not let down either Ray or the other people, or the people who were there but couldn't be present. And uh, I wouldn't say it was a fear, it was just this intense focus. And you could feel it on set every day. Uh, Very, very intent focus on making everything efficient, making everything accurate, trying again if it wasn't right, really listening to Ray, really like I would see these actors so zoned in on every single word he was saying, because they knew that if the rifle didn't sit in their shoulder in the right place, or they didn't move across a room in the right way, or they didn't take a position in the right way, that they would be letting real people down, and they didn't want to do that, and the crew didn't want to do that either. That's my main memory of it.
That's a fantastic memory, and it raises the stakes. Not that a film is ever supposed to be taken lightly, especially when you're being
No, they're
paid.
taken lightly. They're taken very lightly, I would say.
Good.
Often, yeah, I mean, people act like fucking idiots on films the whole time.
Not ours, yes.
Not this one.
Right.
I would say this film had a culture in it that was not on every film set.
Interesting. Um, I'm sure there's, films I think like Caddyshack and some of those comedies where I'm sure things were taken lightly and people weren't as serious, but something like this or Civil War, some of the other works you've done, Ex Machina, if there's a budget involved for me, having done creative things, like you want to make sure, even with this article here, an interview I'm doing with you gentlemen, there's a sense to me, like I want to make sure it's right. I want to make sure it looks great. And, the people at military.com get their value and worth out of my, work. Um, so it's good. It's great to know. And something I'd shared with Ray, in the theater after we were done and had our talk back session, as a veteran, I've watched many war films, Platoon and Apocalypse Now and Saving Private Ryan. And, having sat in a theater and watched so many of them, and I really enjoyed Civil War. I saw that in theaters and saw you gentlemen both worked on that together. This film, your work, impacted me as much as when I saw Saving Private Ryan for the first time. And I don't say that lightly. I don't go around. You can check my other interviews. I don't think I've ever said that before to anybody.
That's an amazing thing to say. And we wouldn't take that lightly either, because you know, that legendary opening sequence of Saving Private Ryan really raised the bar on so many things for every filmmaker.
Absolutely. You know, I've read the press notes of how this came together. Would you gentlemen be able to share that from your perspectives here for this interview for the audience members, please?
Bit of the press notes.
Well, in the press notes, it talks about how you gentlemen were working on Civil War,
Oh,
and you wanted to discuss that.
how we moved from Civil War to this.
Yes.
You know, it was quite simple. I was lucky enough to work with Ray, lucky enough to get to know him, and also lucky enough to see how experienced he was, not just with film sets, but also in transmitting and relaying information. I could see how actors responded to him. I could see how crew responded to him. And he put together some sequences that were a gift from the film's point of view. And in the edit, putting those sequences together, it was a very natural question to call Ray and say, listen, are you interested in making a film together? To take an hour and a half of real combat and attempt to recreate it as honestly and truthfully and without the sort of typical romance of cinema and all the things I imagine someone like you has when you watch a film which is representing war or representing combat, which is you're bumping the whole time. You're having to sort of forgive the film these things that it is like a metronome just regularly getting wrong, and to try and get all of them out of it so that a veteran could watch it for once, or maybe not for once, that's too bold a claim, but watch it from start to finish and not get bumped, but to say this fairly represents something, this fairly gives an account, and feel respected and listened to.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, this is just something I've been wanting to tell for a really long time. Just wasn't sure how or when. Like you know, you're very well aware of my career,
Yes.
my progression and sometimes digression. So yeah, you know, like the journey I've been on to,
Yes.
you know, telling stories and whatnot. And so this is something I've always wanted to do, but I was like really careful because it could have been one of those things that you can give to somebody and they would ruin it, or you know, be focused on something that I wouldn't focus on per se. Maybe not ruin it, but so yeah, you know, having to tell this story, I had to really ask myself because it's, you know, it was emotional. There's a lot of emotional things that are tied to it. Uh, like I mentioned before, just with my friends and whatnot. So having to go through this was gonna kind of unearth a lot of those feelings we oftentimes compartmentalize and take years of therapy to have the maybe not sometimes the courage to talk about it, but even the understanding or the verbiage to communicate it. So I think it was like a really long journey to just make it to this point because it took me to have being able to, you know, to do it and to understand like what I was gonna talk about.
Right. Right. It process it in a way, if that's the right word for you.
Sure, yeah, absolutely.
And be able to share it with other people in a story format and narrative that they could understand maybe in, you know, more common vernacular or vocabulary. You know, we've known each other for some time now. You know, I respect you a lot. Whenever we've talked, you know, when you tell me things, you do them, which is rare at times in our industry and in the world. Sometimes in the military, but not as much. But you know, I felt an integrity in the story that was on the screen. So you talk about, you know, Alex, you'd mentioned people bumping on, you know, veterans bumping, even if you're watching a fire movie and you're a fireman, you're going to bump on something in backdraft or whatever, you know, your profession may be. I did not bump, although, you know, I've not ever been on a SEAL team. I'm, you know, I'm a Marine, you know, more straight leg, common symmetric warfare is my experience, at least in Afghanistan. But on a gut sense, and from what my friends have told me, you know, veterans, it's like, you know, as far as I can tell, you're 100% on the nose of what people would feel in that situation, the horror of what one would experience. I mean, I was stunned at some of the things you brought to light there in the film, and it took me aback watching it. And from those people around me in the theater, there was people on the edge of their seats. I don't think I've seen that in a movie too recently. Maybe like Jurassic Park when I was a kid, and people were on their seats, at the edge of their seats. So for you to have done that and brought that, it does take a great sense of integrity. So, from me to you, that's my processed feedback from having seen it a little over a week ago.
Well, but we deeply appreciate
Yeah,
that.
thanks, Joe.
You're welcome. Are there any final thoughts or takeaways? I know this was for Elliot. Is there anything that you want to express about that, or the film in general, to the American audience or the global audience? We got a couple minutes left. I want to make sure your voice is heard.
Well, what I'd say is that the film hopefully has two functions, and one of them is to speak to veterans and their families, perhaps, and it has that side where it can exist. And I'm excluding the way the film could talk specifically, say, to Elliot, and Ray, of course, can expand on all of this. But there's the veteran side, there's also the civilian side. And I think you could reduce that to a very simple statement, which is that civilians often say, and correctly say, thank you for your service, but they don't necessarily understand very clearly what service might mean. And the unfiltered voice of a veteran and a group of veterans just helps fill in that blank space. And to me, that could only be a good thing.
Yeah, I mean, that would be a shout out to like veterans that are particularly in the film industry, and I hope this serves as like, not that I'm paving the way or a trailblazer by any means, but I, as a filmmaker, like especially for veterans, like there's a lot of stories to tell. We have a voice, and it doesn't just have to be recreating real combat experiences. There's things we've seen as a younger generation, the amount of chaos and evils or just things that we've seen. It's like we've seen a lot in a very short, compressed amount of time, which I think morphs a lot of people's lenses or changes how we view things. And I think we can connect with a lot more people than I think society may understand. Like we can just relate with people who have experienced trauma. And we have a lot to give in the film industry and to tell stories, even if it has nothing to do with the military. We understand the trauma, we understand the journeys, the struggles to get back into society, to become functional members of society. And I think it takes more veterans in the film industry. And I hope this helps. I hope this like breaks the mold open, to show that we do have something to offer, and we can help tell stories as well.
Definitely. I 100% agree. And, you are in great company. Bill Broyles, who wrote Castaway, that was his coming home from Vietnam story. He is a Vietnam veteran Marine, served there, I think, in the late 60s. So
Right.
you're in company with him now, and you're in company with so many more. The Don Belisarios, who created Magnum and Jag and Quantum Leap. He was a Marine back in the 50s. Older now, but he a lot of veterans you're going to be in a club with from now on. And I look forward to seeing more of what you'll do, and definitely you as well, Alex. I've loved your work and appreciate your writings and the screenplays you've written. So we're getting ready to wrap up here. It's been a pleasure, gentlemen. Have a great day, and you have my best wishes for your success. I've shared this film with a lot of my friends, and I've encouraged a lot of people to go see it to get an understanding of what it's really like.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for
Thanks,
your questions and the sentiment. Thank you.
Thanks, Phil.
You're welcome, guys. See you later.
Thank you.